As Keanu Reeves walked through the quiet streets of Maplewood Heights on a late afternoon, he noticed a young boy running toward him. The boy, no older than 10, was disheveled, his shirt stained with blood and his hands trembling. At first, Keanu thought it might be an ordinary neighborhood incident, but the boy's desperate pleas for help told a different story. "Please, you have to help me, boy," the boy cried, his voice trembling with fear. Keanu knelt to the boy's level, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Slow down, kid. Tell me what's going on." The boy, introducing himself as Jake Harper, tearfully explained that masked men had attacked his family. They had taken his mother and left his father unconscious. His trembling voice and the panic in his eyes chilled Keanu. Jake said his father had told him to hide, but when he came out, the men were gone, leaving a threat to return. Keanu knew he had to act quickly. "It's going to be okay," he assured Jake, leading him to his car. "Let's get to your house and figure this out." As they drove, Jake described the terrifying scene. 3 masked men, one with a deep, commanding voice, shouting at his mother to get into a black van with tinted windows. Keanu listened intently, his mind racing. "Do you think my dad's going to be okay?" Jake asked softly, clutching his seatbelt tightly. Keanu hesitated, then replied gently, "I don't know, but I'll do everything I can to help." When they arrived at the Harper residence, the modest house bathed in the golden hues of sunset, the peaceful exterior was a stark contrast to the chaos inside. Keanu's heart raced as he prepared to face whatever was waiting. "Stay here," Keanu instructed Jake firmly, glancing at the boy in the passenger seat. Jake nodded, curling into himself with worry. Keanu approached the house cautiously. The front door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a living room in shambles, overturned furniture, shattered glass, and a coffee table with a splintered leg. Blood smears trailed across the floor toward the staircase. "Peter?" Keanu called, his voice steady despite the dread settling in his chest. "Anyone here?" A faint groan broke the silence. Following the sound, Keanu found Peter Harper sprawled at the base of the stairs, his shirt soaked with blood from a deep gash on his forehead. Keanu quickly checked for a pulse. Relief flooded him as he felt a faint, unsteady beat. "Hang on, Peter," Keanu murmured, tearing a clean strip from a nearby curtain to apply pressure to the wound. He glanced around, searching for anything that could explain what had happened. After stabilizing Peter as best he could, Keanu returned to Jake. "Your dad's alive, but he's hurt. Help is on the way," he said, his tone firm but reassuring. Jake nodded, his small hands gripping the door frame for support. Back inside, Keanu's eyes caught a crumpled piece of paper wedged beneath an overturned coffee table. The message, hastily scrawled, made his stomach drop. 500,000, no cops, 48 hours or you'll never see them again. The simplicity of the note underscored the seriousness of the situation. This was no random act, it was calculated and deliberate. As sirens approached in the distance, Keanu stepped outside to meet the arriving emergency responders. He briefed them quickly. "Peter's inside. He's hurt but alive. His wife and daughter have been taken. I found this note." One of the responders, wide-eyed after reading the note, asked, "Any leads?" "A black van," Keanu replied. "We'll need to act fast if we're going to find them in time." Inside, the forensic team got to work while paramedics tended to Peter. His eyelids fluttered open as they treated him. "Sarah, Emily," he mumbled weakly. "They'll be okay," Keanu promised. "Do you remember anything else? Anything at all?" Peter grimaced, wincing as he tried to recall. "A warehouse? I heard them say something about a warehouse." Keanu nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the paramedics prepared Peter for transport, Keanu knelt beside Jake. "We'll find them," he promised, "but I need you to stay strong." Jake's tear-streaked face lifted to meet Keanu's gaze. "Do you really think we can get them back?" Keanu smiled gently. "I do, and I'm not giving up until we do." "What do you think? Will Keanu find Sarah and Emily in time? Why do you think the kidnappers targeted Peter's family? Share your thoughts in the comments below, give this video a like, and keep watching to see how the story unfolds. The police station buzzed with activity under the stark fluorescent lights. Officers, detectives, and forensic specialists worked tirelessly, their efforts punctuated by the ticking clock on the wall. Keanu Reeves, seated at a nearby desk, studied the ransom note that had been handed over to him. Its chilling message read, $500,000. No cops, 48 hours, or you'll never see them again. While the officers coordinated their efforts, Keanu turned his attention to Jake, who sat bundled in a blanket, his small frame slumped in exhaustion. Despite the trauma he'd endured, Jake was proving invaluable. "Jake," Keanu said gently, sliding a chair closer, "I know you have already told us so much, but I need you to think really hard. Did you hear the men say anything else? Anything at all?" Jake's eyes darted to the floor as he concentrated. "One of them said something about making up for lost time, like they were late or something. And another guy was mad. He kept saying this wasn't supposed to take so long." Keanu nodded, piecing the clues together. "That's helpful, Jake. It means they were in a rush, probably under pressure. That's a good sign for us." Jake looked up, a glimmer of hope in his tear-streaked face. "Does that mean you'll find them faster?" Keanu offered a warm smile. "It means we're closer. We just need a little more time." An hour later, a major breakthrough came. Surveillance footage from a nearby traffic camera had captured a black van matching Jake's description speeding through an intersection near the Harper residence. Officers quickly pulled footage from surrounding areas, tracking the van's movements. "Got it!" an officer called out, pointing to a screen. "They turned off into the industrial district about 10 miles from here." Keanu's stomach tightened. The industrial area was a labyrinth of warehouses, some abandoned, some operational, making it an ideal hideout. Additional clues emerged when a gas station attendant called in a tip. A man matching the description of one of the kidnappers had stopped there shortly before the abduction. Surveillance footage confirmed the sighting. The man had a noticeable limp and purchased cigarettes and several prepaid burner phones. Keanu's thoughts raced. If they're using burner phones, they're trying to stay off the grid. But the gas station gives us a timeline. We're closing in. Back at the station, Keanu approached Peter Harper, who sat in the corner with his head in his hands. His wound had been stitched, but the weight of the situation was etched into his features. "Peter," Keanu said, his voice steady but pressing, "do you know anyone who would want to harm your family?" Peter hesitated, running a hand over his face. "I didn't want to think it could be connected, but there's someone." "Who?" Keanu asked, leaning in. "Trevor Blake," Peter said heavily. "We used to be business partners. I caught him embezzling money a few years back. I threatened to press charges, but he disappeared before I could do anything. If anyone has a reason to hurt me, it's him." Keanu's expression darkened. "Do you think he's capable of this?" Peter looked down. "He's always cared more about money than people. If he thinks he can get revenge or a payout, I wouldn't put it past him." As officers worked to verify Trevor Blake's connection to the case, a chilling text came through on Peter's phone. "No delays, no excuses, $500K or they die." Keanu studied the message, noting the burner phone's area code. It was local, matching the earlier tip. He turned to the officers. "We've got a name, a potential location, and a motive. Let's move." Meanwhile, in the kidnapper's hideout, the dimly lit basement reeked of damp concrete. Sarah Harper sat on the cold floor, her hands bound tightly behind her back. Emily clung to her mother, trembling with fear. A single flickering bulb cast harsh shadows across the room. Opposite them stood three masked men. The leader, Victor, was tall and broad-shouldered, his icy blue eyes cold and calculating. He leaned against a metal table cluttered with burner phones, maps, and cash. "Stop second-guessing me," Victor growled at the man with a limp. "The plan doesn't change. We get the money, and then we decide what happens next." The limping man shifted uncomfortably. "What if Peter can't pay? The longer we wait, the more likely the cops find us." Victor slammed his fist on the table, silencing him. "He'll pay. Men like him always do." The third man, stocky with a perpetual scowl, muttered, "It's not like we're leaving witnesses." His cold gaze settled on Sarah and Emily. Emily flinched, clutching her mother's sleeve. Sarah forced herself to stay composed, her mind racing as she observed every detail. Their dynamics, their weaknesses. "They're scared," Emily whispered. "They don't know what they're doing." Sarah gave her daughter a subtle nod, her heart aching with pride and fear. "Stay quiet," she whispered back. Victor turned to face them. "What are you whispering about?" he demanded. Sarah straightened her back, shielding Emily. I told her to stay calm, she said firmly. Victor sneered but didn't respond. Hours dragged on as the tension thickened. Finally, Sarah noticed the limping man pacing near the stairs, his nervous energy palpable. She decided to take a risk. Hey, Sarah called softly, her voice steady. The man turned sharply, his defensive posture betraying his unease. What do you want? You don't look like you want to be here, Sarah continued, keeping her tone calm and non-threatening. I can see it in your eyes. You don't have to do this. Let us go, and I won't tell anyone about you. You can walk away from this. The man hesitated, his lips twitching as if he wanted to respond but couldn't. Will you really let us go if Peter pays? Sarah pressed, her voice tinged with desperation. We're not a threat to you. You don't need to keep us. The man glanced nervously toward Victor, who was engrossed in a phone call, and then back at Sarah. Just don't talk to me, he muttered, turning away. His avoidance only deepened Sarah's dread. Victor ended his call abruptly, his expression grim. Change of plans, he announced. We're moving to the second location after the drop. No point staying here longer than necessary. The stocky man frowned. And if the cops find us before the drop? They won't, Victor replied coldly. Not unless one of you screws up. Emily clung tightly to her mother, her small voice trembling. Mom, what's going to happen to us? Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself to sound confident. We're going to be okay, Emily. Just stay quiet and listen to me, okay? Back at the Harper household, Keanu Reeves stood in the kitchen, watching Peter pace nervously while Jake sat on the couch, clutching a stuffed animal. The room was thick with tension, broken only by the occasional hum of police radios. Peter's phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the silence. He froze, staring at it as if it might explode. Answer it, Keanu said gently but firmly, stepping closer. Peter hesitated before picking it up, his hands trembling. Hello? Victor's cold, detached voice came through. Here's how this works. You bring $500,000 to Eastside Industrial Park by the old loading docks. Midnight, come alone. If I even think there's a cop in sight, you'll never see your wife and daughter again. Got it? Peter's voice cracked. Wait, I need more time. No more talking, Victor interrupted. You have your instructions. Don't screw this up. The line went dead. Peter slumped forward, gripping his hair in despair. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We'll monitor the drop and do everything we can to keep them safe. But you have to stay calm. Peter nodded weakly, but another message came through barely an hour later. $750,000. New deadline, noon tomorrow. No excuses. The added demand hit Peter like a sledgehammer. He slammed his fist on the counter, sending a coffee mug crashing to the floor. This is impossible, he shouted, his voice breaking. I don't have that kind of money. How am I supposed to save them if I can't meet their demands? Jake flinched at his father's outburst, tears streaming down his face. Are Mommy and Emily coming back? He asked softly. Peter's anger dissolved into guilt as he pulled Jake into a tight hug. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm just so scared. Keanu knelt beside Jake, meeting his tearful gaze. Jake, your mom and sister are strong, and we're going to do everything we can to bring them back. You just have to stay brave, okay? Jake nodded slowly, his small hand gripping Keanu's tightly. Meanwhile, Keanu reviewed the latest updates from the surveillance team. A burner phone used to send the ransom text had been traced to the Eastside Industrial Park, matching the location where the black van had last been seen. This lines up perfectly, Keanu said, pointing to the map. They're using the warehouse district as their base, but they're staying mobile. That's their weak point. Martinez, one of the officers, leaned over. If we know where they're holed up, why not raid the place now? Keanu shook his head. We can't risk tipping them off. If they suspect anything, they could move Sarah and Emily, or worse. At the hideout, Sarah observed the kidnappers closely, noting every interaction and movement. Victor's leadership was clear, but the man with the limp was visibly uneasy, pacing near the stairs. Deciding to take another chance, she called out softly. Hey, Sarah said, keeping her tone steady. The man turned sharply, his posture defensive. What do you want? You don't have to do this, she said, her voice low but firm. You're not like him. You can let us go." The man's eyes flickered with something, doubt perhaps, but he quickly turned away, muttering, "Keep quiet." As midnight approached, Keanu and the team prepared to move in. Officers coordinated silently, positioning themselves around the industrial park. Keanu's radio crackled with updates as the perimeter was secured. "Remember," Keanu said, addressing the SWAT team, "we don't act unless we're certain they're inside. The hostages' safety comes first." As the team crept toward the suspected warehouse, Keanu's heart pounded. Every second counted, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The sound of distant footsteps and muffled voices inside the building confirmed their suspicions. With a final glance at his team, Keanu gave the signal. The rescue was about to begin. Visual on the black van, Martinez whispered over the comms, parked behind the building. "It's definitely them." Keanu Reeves' heart pounded as he crouched behind an abandoned crate. The van's presence confirmed they were on the right track, but the hardest part was still ahead. The East Side Industrial Park, a sprawling maze of decaying warehouses and rusted machinery, was shrouded in eerie silence under the moonlight. Keanu's breath fogged the cold night air as he whispered into his borrowed radio, "All right, team, move in. Keep it quiet." Officers advanced in perfect unison, their steps muffled against the gravel-strewn ground. Keanu followed closely behind, pushing open a steel door that groaned loudly in the stillness. Inside, the warehouse's cavernous space was dimly lit, with moonlight streaming through broken windows. The air smelled of oil, rust, and stale cigarette smoke. "They were here recently," Keanu murmured, scanning the scattered cigarette butts, fast food wrappers, and a coil of loose rope on the floor. The SWAT team fanned out, methodically checking every corner. "No sign of the hostages," an officer reported. Keanu's jaw tightened as he knelt by the ropes. They were frayed at the ends, hastily cut. His flashlight illuminated a trail of footprints leading to a rear exit. "They anticipated this," Martinez said, his frustration evident. "They knew we'd come." Keanu nodded grimly. "They didn't just leave, they fled in a hurry. Check everything. If they made a mistake, we'll find it." Forensic technicians worked quickly, analyzing the scene. A set of faint tire tracks near the rear exit caught their attention. "Two vehicles," one confirmed, measuring the tread patterns. "They split up." "They're dividing our resources," Keanu muttered, his mind racing. "They want to make it harder for us to puedo." Nearby, another officer examined an empty gas can. "Looks like they refueled here." The officer said. "They're planning for a long haul." Keanu's radio crackled. "Reeves, you need to see this." At the command center near the warehouse, Peter sat with Jake, his phone trembling in his hands. A new text message from the kidnappers glared on the screen. "We warned you, no cops." Peter slammed the phone onto the table. "They're toying with us. How am I supposed to get the money if they keep moving the goalposts?" Jake clung to his father's arm, his wide eyes filled with fear. Keanu crouched beside Peter, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't a game. It's about control. But they're leaving clues, and we're following them. We'll find them." Peter looked unconvinced. "You're running out of time." Keanu stood, suppressing his frustration. The kidnapper's psychological tactics were working, but he couldn't let them rattle him. Moments later, an officer called out, holding up a crumpled piece of paper found wedged beneath a shelf. The hastily scrawled directions read, "Dock 17, circled prominently." Keanu's pulse quickened. "This could be it," Keanu said, studying the note. "The docks make sense. It's secluded and easy to flee from if things go wrong." The team cross-referenced tire tracks from the warehouse with surveillance footage from nearby businesses. They confirmed the black van had headed toward the port. As midnight approached, Keanu and the team moved toward Dock 17. The convoy of vehicles traveled silently, lights off to maintain the element of surprise. Officers fanned out, securing the perimeter, while Keanu, Martinez, and a tactical unit approached the boathouse, a dilapidated structure perched on the water's edge. Its peeling paint and broken windows gave it a foreboding presence under the moonlight. "Eyes on all exits," Keanu murmured into his radio. "No one leaves without us knowing." Inside, faint voices carried through the cracked walls. Keanu motioned for his team to pause and listen. The boathouse was dimly lit, its single flickering bulb casting harsh shadows across the space. Sarah and Emily sat tied to chairs in the corner, their wrists raw from the coarse ropes. Emily's face was pale, her wide eyes darting nervously between their captors. Despite her exhaustion, Sarah murmured reassurances, her voice calm but resolute. Victor paced across the room, his boots echoing against the concrete floor. His sharp features twisted in frustration, his paranoia evident. "They're stalling," Victor growled. "We gave them the new deadline. If they wanted their family back, the money would already be here." The stocky accomplice leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You're the one who upped the price and shortened the clock. Maybe you scared them off." Victor's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his voice dangerously low. "Don't question me. I know what I'm doing." Outside, Keanu's team prepared to breach. He glanced at Martinez, signaling him to take the rear entrance. "Stay quiet," Keanu whispered. "We take them down, fast and clean." The sound of faint sobs from inside steeled Keanu's resolve. This was their moment to act. In the corner, the man with the limp hesitated before speaking, his voice unsure. "What if we take a partial payment? Let them go and cut our losses." Victor spun toward him, fury flashing in his eyes. "You're kidding, right?" he snarled. "We've come this far, and you want to fold. Are you stupid or just scared?" The limping man flinched under Victor's glare, but pressed on. "Look around, Victor. The longer we stay, the bigger the risk. You think Peter doesn't have the cops crawling all over this by now?" Outside, Keanu Reeves crouched behind an old storage crate, his heart pounding. The tactical unit had split into two groups, one to secure the perimeter and block any escape routes, the other to breach the boathouse. Keanu stayed close to Martinez, observing the building through a night vision scope as an officer scanned the interior through a gap in the grimy window. "Visual on two captives, no immediate threats near them," the officer whispered. Keanu's voice came through steady over the comms. "Copy that. Hold positions. Wait for the signal." Muffled voices from inside drifted through the walls, Victor's anger audible even if his words weren't. Keanu took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. One wrong move, and Sarah and Emily could be in greater danger. Inside, Sarah watched the tension between Victor and the limping man, her mind racing for an opportunity. The doubt in the limping man's eyes gave her hope, even as Victor's paranoia grew. "Please," Sarah said softly, her voice cutting through the tension. Victor turned sharply, his piercing gaze locking onto her. The limping man glanced at her nervously. "You don't have to do this," Sarah continued, her tone steady. "Let us go, and I promise Peter will find a way to make this right. No one has to get hurt." Victor snorted and dragged a chair across the floor, its screech echoing in the silent room. Sitting in front of Sarah, he leaned in close, his expression menacing. "Do you think I'm stupid enough to trust a promise? Peter's the reason you're here. He's weak, slow, and out of options." Sarah held his gaze, her calm exterior masking her fear. "Peter won't give up on us. He'll come through, and when he does, you'll regret this." Victor smirked. "Oh, I'm counting on Peter. But when he realizes he's out of time, I'll make sure he knows what happens when you cross me." Outside, Keanu signaled for the team to prepare. The moonlight reflected off the rippling water near Dock 17 as officers adjusted their tactical gear. The faint sound of raised voices from inside confirmed the kidnappers were still there. Martinez's voice crackled over the comms. "Perimeter secured. All units in position. Ready on your mark." Keanu took a deep breath, gripping the radio. "Stand by for breach. 3, 2, 1, move!" The door to the boathouse burst open with a thunderous crack as the SWAT team stormed inside. Flashbangs detonated, their blinding light and deafening noise disorienting the kidnappers. Chaos erupted. "What the hell?" Victor shouted, scrambling towards Sarah and Emily. He pulled a knife from his belt, pressing it against Sarah's neck. "Back off, or she dies." The limping man stumbled backward, his hands raised. "Victor, this wasn't the plan," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Shut up!" Victor barked. "Nobody's leaving until I say so." Keanu stepped into the room slowly, his hands raised. His voice was calm but firm. "Victor, listen to me. Nobody wants this to end badly. Let Sarah and Emily go, and we'll talk." Victor's eyes darted wildly around the room, sweat dripping from his brow. You think I'm stupid? You've got snipers outside, don't you? Keanu kept his voice steady. We're not here to hurt anyone. But this ends now, Victor. Let them go, and we'll figure this out. Sarah's eyes flicked to the limping man, her instincts telling her he might be her chance. Subtly, she shifted her weight, preparing to act if the opportunity came. Victor tightened his grip on Sarah, his movements erratic. Back off, or she's dead. Summoning her courage, Sarah drove her elbow into the limping man's side, sending him stumbling into Victor. The sudden impact knocked Victor off balance. Now, Keanu shouted. The SWAT team moved with precision. An officer tackled Victor, disarming him before he could react. Another subdued the limping man, pinning him to the ground. The third kidnapper, attempting to flee through the back exit, was intercepted by Martinez. Clear, an officer called out as the last kidnapper was restrained. Keanu rushed to Sarah and Emily, cutting the ropes that bound them. Emily flung her arms around her mother, sobbing into her shoulder. Sarah winced as a shallow cut on her neck stung, but her voice remained steady as she whispered to Emily, "We're safe now, it's over." Keanu crouched beside them, his expression one of relief. You're both going to be okay. Paramedics are on their way. As the team swept the boathouse, they discovered more than they expected. Under a workbench, a locked briefcase contained incriminating documents. Inside were photographs, account numbers, and names that linked Victor to a sprawling criminal network responsible for extortion and kidnappings across multiple states. Keanu handed the evidence to Martinez, his expression resolute. This isn't just about Sarah and Emily anymore. We're taking them all down. Sarah, holding Emily close, looked up at Keanu. Thank you, she said, her voice breaking with gratitude. Keanu gave her a reassuring smile. You're safe now. That's all that matters. Looks like Victor was small time compared to whoever is running this, Martinez said, flipping through the documents recovered from the briefcase. Keanu Reeves nodded grimly, his expression heavy. This isn't over, but it's a start. We've got enough to bring the rest of them down. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air as paramedics and additional officers arrived. Minutes later, a car screeched to a halt near the boathouse, and Peter Harper stepped out, pale and visibly shaken. Jake bolted from the car, his small legs carrying him as fast as they could. Mommy, Jake cried, throwing himself into Sarah's arms. Sarah held him tightly, tears streaming down her face. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. Peter joined them, his hands trembling as he gently touched Sarah's cheek. I thought I'd lost you, he said, his voice breaking. We're okay, Sarah replied, her voice a mix of exhaustion and relief. Thanks to them. Keanu stepped back, allowing the family their moment. Watching Jake cling to his mother and Peter wrap Emily in a protective embrace, Keanu felt a wave of satisfaction. This was why he had stepped in, risking so much to help. As paramedics tended to Sarah's injuries and Emily's shock, Keanu approached Peter. We found evidence connecting Victor to a larger network. This wasn't just about ransom. It was part of something much bigger. We'll keep digging, but for now, your family is safe. Peter nodded, gratitude evident in his tearful expression. Thank you, he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. Keanu gave a small, tired smile. You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad you're all okay. Back at the police station, the harsh fluorescent lights illuminated the interrogation rooms. Victor sat at the steel table, leaning back defiantly with his arms crossed. A smug sneer spread across his face as if he held the upper hand. Detective Martinez stood across from him, holding the case file. Victor, you're looking at a laundry list of charges: kidnapping, extortion, assault, conspiracy. Shall I keep going? Victor smirked. Doesn't matter. You don't have enough to pin me to anything beyond this job. Martinez raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Oh, we've got plenty. The briefcase, the burner phones, your accomplices. And when the court hears what that little girl and her mother went through, he leaned in closer, his voice cold. You'll wish you'd never laid a hand on them. Victor's smirk faltered slightly, but he stayed silent, his defiance intact. In the next room, the man with the limp sat hunched over, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. His demeanor was the opposite of Victor's. Fear and regret were etched across his face. Keanu sat across from him, his voice calm but firm. We know you're not the mastermind. You're scared, and you should be. But this is your chance to make it easier on yourself. Tell us what you know, and the DA might show leniency. The man hesitated, his eyes darting toward the one-way mirror. Victor's not going to protect me, he muttered, almost to himself. You're right, Keanu said, pressing gently. Victor only cares about himself, but you've got a chance to walk away from this with less time. Help us take down the real people behind this. The man sighed heavily, his resolve breaking. It's bigger than us. This whole thing was set up by Trevor Blake. Keanu stiffened at the name. Trevor Blake, Peter Harper's former business partner. The man nodded grimly. Yeah, he's been funding jobs like this for months. He picks the targets, people he has grudges against or thinks he can squeeze for money. Keanu and Martinez reconvened with the team, combing through the growing pile of evidence. Financial records seized from Victor's briefcase revealed bank transfers tied to shell companies linked to Trevor Blake. It's all here, Martinez said, pointing at the computer screen. Blake's been funneling money through these accounts to fund the gang. He's using them as his personal enforcers. Keanu leaned back, his expression grim. He was targeted because of their fallout. This wasn't just about money, it was revenge. An officer burst into the room clutching a file. We've tracked Trevor's current whereabouts. He's booked a flight out of state for tonight. Keanu's eyes narrowed. He's running, not for long. Under the cover of darkness, Keanu joined the team as they surrounded a private airfield on the city's outskirts. Trevor Blake's sleek black car pulled up to the tarmac where a small jet waited, its engines idling. Trevor stepped out, his expensive suit and calm demeanor betraying no sense of urgency. Move in, Keanu said into the comms. The team swarmed the area, weapons drawn. Trevor Blake, you're under arrest, an officer shouted. Trevor froze, his hands instinctively raising as officers closed in. This is a mistake, he protested. I've done nothing wrong. Keanu stepped forward, holding up the incriminating financial records. Save it for the courtroom, Trevor. We've got all the proof we need. As Trevor was handcuffed and led to a waiting squad car, his composure cracked. You'll regret this. You don't know who you're dealing with, he shouted, his voice echoing across the airfield. Back at the station, Sarah and Emily sat in a quiet room. Emily clutched a stuffed animal, her small hands trembling as Sarah gently stroked her hair. You're both incredibly brave, Keanu said, sitting across from them. Anything you can tell us will help make sure these men pay for what they've done. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. Victor was in charge, but the others didn't seem as sure. The one with the limp, he hesitated. I think he wanted out, but was too afraid. Emily spoke up, her voice small but determined. They said Daddy couldn't stop them. And Victor, he said they'd hurt Mommy if the money didn't come fast enough. Keanu nodded, his heart heavy but grateful for their courage. You've helped us more than you know. I promise we'll make sure they don't hurt anyone else. News of Trevor Blake's arrest spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the community. For years, he had been a respected businessman. Now, his carefully constructed facade was shattered, exposing the monster beneath. Outside his home, Peter addressed reporters. What happened to my family was horrific, but it exposed something much bigger. Trevor Blake used his power and resources to destroy lives. I won't stop until he's held accountable. Inside, Sarah watched Peter's statement on the news. She looked at Emily and spoke quietly but firmly. We'll testify. We'll make sure they never hurt anyone else. With Trevor in custody and Victor's gang dismantled, the police worked tirelessly to build an airtight case. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, Victor's briefcase, and testimonies from Sarah, Emily, and even the limping man. Keanu Reeves stood in the precinct's conference room alongside the officers, addressing the team. The hard part's over, getting them off the streets. Now we need to make sure they stay there. This case has to be bulletproof. Martinez nodded. The DA's confident. With everything we've got, it'll be hard for Blake or Victor to squirm out of this. Keanu allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. They had uncovered a massive criminal operation and ensured that justice was finally within reach. The courtroom buzzed with subdued murmurs as the trial of Victor, his accomplices, and Trevor Blake began. The gallery was packed with spectators, journalists, and community members eager to see justice served. At the center of it all sat the Harper family, Peter, Sarah, Emily, and Jake, braving the intimidating atmosphere with quiet determination. Peter clenched Sarah's hand tightly as the bailiff called the court to order. Jake, seated beside them, gripped his mother's other hand, his wide eyes taking in the scene. Although Jake wasn't required to testify, he insisted on attending every day of the trial. His once swollen eye had healed, but the emotional scars lingered. He leaned against Sarah for comfort, his small hand rarely letting go of hers. Sarah was the first to take the stand. Dressed simply, her voice was steady, but tinged with emotion as she recounted the harrowing details of their abduction. The courtroom fell silent as she described Victor's threats and her desperate efforts to shield Emily. "I didn't know if we'd make it out alive," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "But I knew I had to stay strong for my daughter." When Emily took the stand, the atmosphere grew heavier. Her bravery shone through her fear as she described their captivity. Her voice broke when she recounted Victor using a knife to intimidate Sarah. I thought he was going to hurt her," Emily whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "I just wanted us to go home." Keanu testified next, providing a detailed account of the investigation, the ransom drop, and the rescue. Trevor Blake's defense team attempted to undermine his statements, but Keanu remained composed, responding to every question with clarity. "Mr. Reeves," Trevor's defense attorney said, leaning forward, "isn't it true that you relied on unverified information to locate my client's supposed involvement?" Keanu met the lawyer's gaze evenly. "Every lead we followed was corroborated by evidence. Financial records, testimonies, and surveillance footage leave no doubt about Mr. Blake's role." The prosecution presented a relentless case. Financial documents tied Blake directly to the gang, and Victor's accomplice testified about Blake's instructions to target Peter Harper. Surveillance footage from the warehouse and dock solidified his connection to the operation. This was not a crime of passion, the prosecutor declared in her closing argument. It was calculated, cold-blooded extortion fueled by greed and personal vendettas. Trevor Blake used his wealth and influence to destroy lives, but today justice will prevail. After days of testimony, the jury deliberated for only a few hours before delivering their verdict. Trevor Blake was found guilty on multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping, extortion, and racketeering. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in prison, his once pristine reputation in ruins. Victor and the other kidnappers received equally harsh sentences. Victor was sentenced to 15 years, while his accomplices received 10 each. Trevor's composure cracked as the sentences were read, his stoic mask slipping into visible defeat. In the gallery, Peter exhaled deeply, tears welling in his eyes. Sarah wrapped an arm around Emily, who leaned into her mother with relief. Jake looked up at Keanu, offering a small, grateful smile. The Harper family relocated to a new neighborhood, determined to leave the haunting memories behind. Their new home was smaller but warmer, a fresh start for a family that had endured so much. Sarah and Emily began counseling, finding strength in sharing their experiences. Peter rebuilt his contracting business, vowing to protect his family no matter what. Jake, though still processing the trauma, showed remarkable resilience. He joined a soccer team, finding solace in camaraderie and activity. His once anxious demeanor transformed into quiet confidence, a testament to his strength. One sunny morning, Keanu drove through the Harper's neighborhood, the rhythmic hum of his patrol car comforting. As he passed their house, he spotted Jake on the porch. The boy's confident smile replaced the fear that had once defined him. Jake waved enthusiastically. Keanu returned the gesture, a quiet sense of pride settling over him. Sometimes, he thought, victories weren't about medals or recognition. They were about moments like this, where lives were genuinely changed for the better. Keanu's radio crackled, pulling him back to the present. Another call awaited, another life that might need his help. As he drove away, Jake's waving figure faded into the distance, leaving Keanu with the quiet satisfaction of a battle well fought. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.